Hi, I'm Jennifer Duda for the McInnes Art Center at College of DuPage. Buffalo Theater Ensemble is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and its upcoming production of Ken Ludwig's Moon Over Buffalo is coming up in January. Joining me are the director and cast. Thanks for joining me, guys. I want to talk a bit about this production, and I'd like to start with a brief synopsis. So Connie, if you would.
Moon Over Buffalo is set in Buffalo, New York in 1953, and it's set at a small theater company. It's set primarily in what we call the green room, which is the lounge of the theater, although there are two scenes that are on stage. And it's a story of Charlotte and George Hay and their family, who are part of the troupe. And they're doing two shows in what's called repertory, which means that they alternate performances. So they're doing Private Lives, a comedy by Noel Coward, and Cyrano. And they've cut Cyrano down to 5 actors playing multiple roles. So it's kind of a ragtag group. And the play, in many ways, is about everything that can possibly go wrong backstage, and also how the love of a family can jump lots of difficulty and crises, and banding together. The show must go on, and supporting those that you love, which in many ways is apropos for Buffalo Theater Ensemble. So
there's quite a bit of action, as you said, a lot of different things going on in a very small performance space. How do you juggle the two or make one fit in the other?
Yes, it's very challenging. And we have been meeting for weeks in production team with designers. I think we were up to 7 or something like that models of different sets, completely different sets. Picking and choosing what seems to work for this space, thinking about the action that happens in each area, et cetera, et cetera. And the largest challenge is honestly that it happens backstage and on stage. So the way that our production is going to deal with that is to have a second story. And in the second story, we'll see what happens front of stage, because the majority of the action happens in the lounge. Different productions do this differently. On Broadway, they did it with winches and turn sets in and out. Of course, the winch broke on opening night, and Carol Burnett had to come out and answer questions from the audience for 20 minutes while they fixed the winch. But we're doing it in a preset mode.
And speaking of action, Bryan, you get beat up a little bit.
As usual.
Figuratively and
Discuss
literally.
what your poor character goes through and how you're preparing for this.
Oh, well, there's a little bit of sword play with my wife, Charlotte. Good-natured sword play. It's one of their ways of expressing their love for what they do and their love for each other. So certainly that's always a bit of a challenge. And then there is some more physical activity, whether it's Charlotte beating up on me a little bit or other characters trying to hide me from certain other characters. Don't want to give away too much. But certainly, you know, the only way you really prepare for that is be in the best shape that you can, know the lines, and just hope for the best.
And the characters, it's quite a dysfunctional bunch. They have a lot going on. But as you said, you know, there's a love among all of them. So Loretta, how do you see that all working together? How does this dysfunctional group of people manage to continue on, though, because they really do love each other when it all comes down to the end?
Well, they just, because they're theater people, they do it. You just have to. You can't imagine your life not doing it. So it works through the characters and through just theater. It's a very theatrical piece.
And your character, Ethel, is quite brassy.
Yeah.
And very funny. She's got some great lines. How is Ethel different or even similar to other characters you've played with BTE?
Well, it's similar, I suppose, in the fact that I've gotten to a certain age where that's who I am, as I'm the old lady, and it has the comic element of the fact that she not only is hard of hearing, but she mishears, which is part of the comedic part of the show. So I'm not too kind to my son-in-law, which is Bryan, and that's kind of a angst that goes through the whole play.
Now, Amelia, how would you describe the dynamic between Charlotte and George?
Between Charlotte and George, they have such humongous egos. I can't imagine that they can fit into the same room at the same time, and they adore each other. But I think they speaking for Charlotte, adores herself just as much as
Right.
she adores George.
It's a very loving but contentious relationship. Two, as Amelia mentioned, two oversized egos trying to share the same stage is one of the earmarks of the relationship, and it creates a lot of the comedy and certainly kind of the reality of that relationship of two people who do, I think in the end, ultimately really, really love each other, but also having been in the theater together for so long and lived together so long, have many other things that they don't necessarily agree on.
Now, this is a comedy. It's heavy on the situation comedy. I'm curious, from an acting point of view, what is harder to perform, comedy or drama?
I think comedy.
Yes, dying is easy. Comedy
Comedy
is
is
hard.
hard.
That's a typical George Hay thing to do. I've stolen that line from someone. I'm not sure who.
What makes it such a challenge? Is it the timing that's necessary?
Yeah.
Does that have a lot to do with it?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think the thing about comedy is that even though you know the jokes as they were, whether they're actual verbal jokes or the physicality of the jokes, you need to keep it fresh and spontaneous.
Right.
And that's not to say that dramas don't necessarily require that, but with comedy, the audience will know if it's canned, for lack of a better term. So trying to keep just the spontaneity of the comedy fresh every night, so it's new to you and thereby new and fresh for the audience. It's a big challenge.
And it's really true. I mean, true comedy, the characters don't know they're in a comedy. I mean, they're in extreme crisis. So it's vesting in that extreme crisis, which is exhausting, plus the physicality, which is exhausting, and the pace at which it moves, the number of lines there are. It's a workout.
Would you say it's also difficult as a director then, comedy versus drama?
I think they both have challenges, and they both have things that sort of fall into place almost like mathematics, you know? But the issue with comedy is the spontaneity, the seeming spontaneity.
Right.
Now, as director, how do you balance the original script, the original story, and make it uniquely BTE at the same time?
I think if individuals are living through characters and you've arrived at the artistic visuals, the spectacle, what we call the spectacle of the show internally, it has no choice but to live as its own piece. I've never seen the show produced. I've seen clips of the original show, and I've talked about the show often, and I've read reviews, et cetera, but I've never actually seen the show. But even for shows that I have seen that I then direct, or shows that I've directed more than once, they're never the same. They just can't be because of the dynamic internally. Even we did a restaging of a show several years later with the same cast and the same director, and none of us remembered what we had done. It was a two-person show. So I never worry about that. I worry about making the show live, and then it's going to have its own unique voice. Certainly BTE has its own unique voice, coming from an ensemble base. So as long as we stay true to the origins, the themes and dynamics in the piece, it's going to live on its own.
And I think too, because we've all worked together so many different times. Bryan's played Loretta's son, and I've played your daughter, and we've been on stage together, and we've directed each other, that there's something that there's already a family here. So that we have a history. We don't have to imbue the characters with that history. We have that history already.
You basically have that foundation of relationship just from having worked so closely together that it very easily transfers into whatever the narrative situation is for the characters. You kind of have that language already in place. So it's a few less steps that you need to worry about in rehearsal, because you step into rehearsal with those relationships. Good and bad, I suppose.
We know that Loretta hates you already, so
right. So that's
I was just thinking about, Amelia and I were talking, we had kind of a hectic morning this morning in other realms, and as she was saying something to me this morning, I'm thinking in my head, that is so Charlotte. I didn't say it out loud, but so.
Well, now, the end of the play, I was skimming through the script, is all nice and tied up, which seems a little too easy. As I'm reading it. What do you feel about the end of the play? I mean, Loretta, how do you feel that things kind of end for this family?
It's a farce. It's not real life. It has the conventions of what moves it forward and ties it up, and it's not real. It's just
Theater.
our way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's the only way that you can end it. It's one of the wonderful ways that Ludwig has constructed the play is he is able to tie things up pretty neatly. And we are not supposed to believe it to be reality, but within the reality of Moon Over Buffalo, it makes perfect sense.
And it probably will repeat itself that afternoon.
I really believe that's what I like about the ending, without giving the ending away, is that you think it's all tied up, and then all at once they're off and running again.
Right.
Do you know? And that's where we end. They're already into the next chapter. That life is never over. You know, it's always the next chapter.
Well, one thing that's certainly not over, to use a very cheesy segue, is Buffalo Theater Ensemble. You've got 25 years under your belt, and I want to talk about the next 25 years. So I'm curious, Loretta, what's been your favorite BTE production, whether you were in it or not?
Oh my goodness. There's been so many. Frankie and Johnny with these two was a highlight. I loved doing Mrs. Klein a number of years ago as a script. It just was a fabulous opportunity, but I've had the best shows in my life since I've been with BTE. I've got to play the wonderful characters, so it's been a great thing.
And we'll put Bryan in the hot seat. Of the characters Loretta has played, what has been your favorite?
Oh, that's almost too hard to answer, really. I can go back from the first show that I think I did with Loretta was La Comard Angel, and it was a quote-unquote smaller role. She played one of the boarders, but she had such wonderful life throughout the whole show that was wonderful. I think about Rabbit Hole, certainly, which was a wonderful show as well.
On Golden Pond.
On Golden Pond. But I think personally, I really enjoyed Horton Foote's Trip to Bountiful. And
wonderful.
Was wonderful in that, and I was blessed and lucky to play her son in that. So to be able to share the stage with her in that relationship with such a wonderfully just emotional show about life and its journey and everything, and her performance in that, watching her every night, whether it was on stage or listening to her backstage in the scenes that I was not in, was one of the great experiences for me as a performer.
I have to jump in because my favorite was when I was on stage with her in Grace and Glory. I mean, I've been on stage with Loretta several times, but we did a two-person play, Grace and Glory, that was my favorite. So with you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny to me that it doesn't, because theater is live, and we have some pictures of it behind us, they're rolling right now, but we mention these scripts, and the whole experience comes back to me immediately just by naming it. I could see you sitting in that chair when you were doing that hymn. Or, you know, just it's so funny how each show has its own life.
And each show also has a team of people you never see. We've got a number of designers. You get to see their work, but you don't see them per se, the lighting and the makeup and the costuming and the sets. Thinking back to BT Productions, can you point to some significant moments for you as actors working with these designers?
Yeah, I mean many. Probably some of my personal favorites were Angels in America, which had a beautiful design. I mean, the entire design, I'm thinking primarily about the set design, which was Galen Ramsey. Noise is Off. The last time we did a big farce, Michael Moon's set was hysterical. In fact, one of the most intriguing moments in the show, I think, was the scene changes, where you see backstage become front stage and then going back to backstage.
Audience members used to stay for intermission because they wanted to watch
and
it.
applaud when it happened. And the same thing happened with costumes, of course, with costume changes in Angels and in Noise is Off. Although, you know, some of the most, flamboyant, I don't know if that's the correct word, costumes were in smaller shows like Couple White Chicks, you know, those were extremely well done from scene to scene. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful production team that is a part of Buffalo Theater Ensemble. So.
And looking ahead, what do you hope for the next 25 years?
25 years?
Yeah.
Or 25 more, perhaps?
Yeah.
Vibrancy and sharing
and really giving stories life, taking story, because we don't exist in a vacuum, you know? So the opportunity of sharing with our audience our mission of bringing relationships to life and different sides of relationships, which is something that a lot of theaters shy away from because it's glitzier to do bigger shows. But looking at human condition helps us all sort of examine what it is to be human and what choices we make as human beings in this society. So.
Well, I wish you the best of luck as BTE continues. Thanks for coming in once again. If you would like more information on Moon Over Buffalo and all the upcoming performances by BTE, you can call the MAC ticket office at 630-942-4000 or visit them on the web at themac.org.